Hello guys, Jerry speaking. In 2013, before I came to Arlington, Virginia, Washington D.C., I have made a let's say a tribute to Robert MacNeil and Jim Lehrer with my purchase on DVD to Annette Miller before she retired about 8 years later. Now, due to copyright reasons, I cannot show you all of them. Some of them may be clips from the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour, and some of them can be the NewsHour of Jim Lehrer. I'm not showing you some of them due to copyright reasons, but the best moments ever. But I'll show just to edit out portions of it. But I'll show you some of it due to copyright reasons. That way, it can be more easier that way. But in the meantime, let's show you the whole, just some of the clips that may not contain Elsa's quote, but maybe contain MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour and NewsHour Jim Lehrer sometimes. Enjoy the episode, and I'll see you in the next one, which is going to be FBOX episode number 4 and 3. See ya. Hello guys, this is Jerry speaking. Today, I'm celebrating 4th of July. I'm recording this for MacNeil and Lehrer because 1, I'm making a tribute for them, which they'll be awesome. 2, sorry, that was me touching the phone. Anyway, 2, I'm going to be making some archival episodes of MacNeil Lehrer. And 3, I'm going to be doing more ideas for doing LJPM episodes. So get ready, folks, because this is the start right now.
Good evening. Tonight, did PACs influence the results of the election, and how beholden will the new Congress be to the PACs who contributed? Jim?
Robin, the list of candidates who received the most in PAC contributions is a list of winners. In the Senate, the top 10 PAC money recipients all won their races. Pete Wilson, the Republican who defeated Democrat Jerry Brown in California, received the most. Republican Orrin Hatch, who retained his seat in Utah, was second. Senator Lloyd Bentsen, Democrat of Texas, was third. Senator David Durenberger, Republican of Minnesota, fourth, with Senate Minority Leader Robert Byrd of West Virginia in fifth place. All of the top 10 on the House side were incumbents, and all but one was reelected. Democrat Philip Burton of California got the most PAC money. Republican Minority Leader Robert Michel was second. Third place went to the only loser on the list, Republican John Russolo of California. Then came Democrat Dan Rostenkowski, chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and Democrat Jim Howard, chairman of the House Public Works and Transportation Committee. On the giving side, the PACs handing out the most money were those of the National Association of Realtors, the American Medical Association, the United Auto Workers, the International Union of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, and the National Education Association. According to Common Cause, the total PAC money that went into last week's congressional elections was $80 million. Robin?
Did you go to them, or did they come to you, all those PACs?
It was a combination of the two. I sent out a letter outlining what I'd run for Congress to do. I outlined my record over the 4 years, and I asked PACs to contribute. And from that letter, I received about 1,000 PAC contributions to the best of my recollection, Robin.
Do you feel that any of them gave you money to buy influence?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to note that power, in a political sense, is a zero-sum game. PACs hadn't created power. Eliminating PACs won't do away with it. What PACs have done is taken power away from other groups that have historically exerted it. They've taken power away from the power broker in the smoke-filled room and the labor union and the political party, and away from the media. And if you believe that the fragmentation of power is a good thing, that the separation of powers promotes freedom and protects democracy, then I think you have to believe that PACs are a good thing. On the other hand, if you are supported by groups that had more power before the PAC movement, in general, you oppose them.
And going for public financing of congressional elections, Congressman?
Well, I'm opposed to public financing. I don't think we ought to pay people's tax money to pay for individuals to run for Congress. If we're going to limit PAC contributions, I think we've got to limit the activities of other people that affect the election process. Because again, we're not taking political power away from the PACs. We're simply transferring that power to somebody else. We're not destroying it. I think that's the key point that is missed in most of the debate.
Okay, we have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us from Houston, Congressman. Senator Proxmire, Ms. McBride, and Mr. Thaxton, thank you for joining us in Washington. Good night, Jim.
Good night, Robin.
That's all for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night. Good evening. Last week, the toxic chemical dioxin was found at a former chemical plant site in Newark, New Jersey. The governor immediately offered to provide families living nearby with temporary housing for safety. Those are the questions we raised tonight. Jim?
Robin, it's important to understand a few basics about dioxin itself. Number one, it's not just one chemical. It's a shorthand name for a family of some 75 different chemical compounds, each with very long and complicated names. The most toxic of them, for instance, being 2378 tetrachlorodibenzoparadioxin, TCDD, thankfully for short. Seldom, if ever, has any chemical manufacturer set out to intentionally make dioxin. It's what's called an unwanted byproduct of processes used in making compounds that have been wanted, such as those in herbicides and in various antibacteria chemicals like hexachlorophene. The public health problem, or potential problem, comes via one of several avenues: through the improper or uninformed disposal of the unwanted dioxin waste, as in the case of Times Beach. There, a waste hauler picked up dioxin-filled waste from a chemical plant, combined it with oil, and then sprayed it on the dusty roads of Times Beach and other Missouri towns.
Is dioxin still being produced? In other words, are new sites being created?
Well, the problem is, and this is a major problem and in my opinion a scandal, the Environmental Protection Agency is still allowing millions of pounds of herbicides that contain dioxin to be sprayed throughout the United States. In fact, the same two chemicals that composed Agent Orange, 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T, are being sprayed all over America, even though in 1979 EPA put a partial ban on 2,4,5-T, suspended some uses of it on the grounds that it was killing unborn children in areas where it was being sprayed.
Efforts for the federal government to deal with the issues of dioxin that we're facing today. And I think, as was stated earlier, we feel we're doing that in a responsible fashion where we find dioxin. And we do feel that there are health effects from the dioxin. We're trying to regulate that waste
I'm afraid,
as well as clean it up.
I hate to interrupt you, but we are at the end of our time. Dr. Saunders in San Francisco, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Silbergeld in Washington, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Regenstein. Good night, Jim.
Good night, Robin.
Thanks very much. That's all for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow night. I'm Robert MacNeil.
Funding
Good night.
for the
Good evening. These are the top headlines today. All over the world, people mark the 40th anniversary of the dropping of the first atomic bomb on Hiroshima. South Africa's state-run radio hinted that changes in apartheid will be announced soon. The space shuttle Challenger landed after 8 days in orbit. For the second time in 4 years, Major League Baseball players have gone on strike. Jim?
After the news of the day, the 40th anniversary of Hiroshima is what the NewsHour is all about tonight. We will hear from novelist Kurt Vonnegut, writer-historian William Manchester, former National Security official McGeorge Bundy, psychiatrist Alvin Toussaint, educator Jacqueline Wexler, Bank Vice President Deborah Edwards, and our regular essayist Roger Rosenblatt of Time magazine.
Around the world today, people and nations mark the 40th anniversary of Hiroshima, some with prayers and some with protests and accusations.
and there were several Hiroshima anniversary demonstrations in this country. Churches in Boston and several other places in Massachusetts and Rhode Island rang bells. In Chicago, there was an all-night vigil and a floating gallery of peace art. In Baltimore, Pittsburgh, San Francisco, and many other cities, including Washington, sidewalks were whitewashed with shadows to duplicate the image of those killed at Hiroshima. The tying of ribbons was also a major activity of the day. One was put around the governor's mansion in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and a peace ribbon was used in a California demonstration that went from Santa Monica to downtown Los Angeles. Dozens of small ribbons were tied together to make the large 500 feet long ribbon, which was displayed on Wilshire Boulevard. That ribbon was included in another demonstration, a human chain that was to stretch 15 miles from the Santa Monica seacoast to the Los Angeles Civic Center.
40 years ago today, there was an event that changed the world in many ways. The first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan, by the orders of President Harry S. Truman. As we reported, people around the world have been marking that anniversary today. We do so tonight by devoting the rest of the news hour to a discussion of what Hiroshima means. For this unusual program, we have an unusual cast. Novelist Kurt Vonnegut, whose book Slaughterhouse-Five dealt with the horror of the firebombing of Dresden. William Manchester, the writer and historian who barely survived his wounds on Okinawa and wrote, "Thank God for the atomic bomb." McGeorge Bundy, National Security Advisor to Presidents Kennedy and Johnson during two great crises of the nuclear Cold War. Jacqueline Wexler, a former nun, now director of the National Conference of Christians and Jews. Dr. Alvin Poussant, professor of psychiatry at Harvard.
I couldn't grasp it.
You couldn't grasp it, but...
I couldn't grasp the enormity of nuclear weapons.
But
There's a case in which reality exceeded imagination.
in your own personal case, how did you react to the idea that this might have ended or might be about to end the Second World War in a great hurry?
Well, once it sank in, my feeling about the bomb may be called self-serving because it meant I was going to live. I would have been patched up, probably in time for the November 1st landing in Kyushu, and certainly for the March 1st landing on Honshu. And the Marine divisions were going to go ashore in the first wave, and we would have been slaughtered.
Think about it.
To some extent, I think I am fatalistic about it. I think that it could very easily get into the hands of somebody like Gaddafi or a third world nation, and I'm not sure what would happen after that. I'm not sure that I believe that we have control over the process anymore. I think there's enough going on in terms of world politics that it could very easily be out of control. And somebody mentioned that it's irresponsible, but on the other hand, I'm not sure anybody knows what to do at this point in time. Don't we have enough nuclear weapons in the world? What more can you do?
I think we will leave it with your question hanging. Ms. Edwards in Chicago, thank you very much. In Boston, Dr. Poussant and McGeorge Bundy, our thanks to both of you. In New York, Jacqueline Wexler, Kurt Vonnegut, and William Manchester. Robin?
Good night, Jim. That's our news hour for tonight. We will be back tomorrow night. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night. Good evening. For many Americans, this is the hardest Christmas season in memory. More than 12 million people remain officially unemployed. Those who pinned their hopes on Congress passing special jobs legislation were disappointed this week. Congress went home for Christmas without passing any jobs creation bill. Those proposals were jettisoned at the last hour to avoid a presidential veto and to pass a spending bill to keep the government running. Jim?
Robin, some of the new poor have taken to the road, heading west or south in search of a job and a better life, and thus far found neither. Others have held fast where they are, trying to hold on until the plant or the business hires them back or another job becomes available until the recession and their hard times blow over. They're still holding fast. For both, Christmas 1982 will be a grim one, spiritually as well as physically, even as private individuals, churches, and charitable groups have mounted special efforts to help. Altogether, they form a picture of this Christmas that shows both the kindest and cruelest faces of our society. A picture producer-cameraman Philip Garvin captured in 2 reports, one from Canton, Ohio, the other from Denver, Colorado. Robin?
In some parts of the country where the climate is mild enough, tent cities have sprung up, and many families will be spending Christmas that way this year. But further north, the winter makes outdoor living impossible. For the first of our 2 reports tonight, Phil Garvin went to Denver, Colorado. For thousands of unemployed, the only hope was to drive west. That's all for tonight. For all of us at the MacNeil Lehrer Report, may I wish everyone in our audience some joy this holiday. Good night, Jim.
Good night, Robin.
We'll be back on Monday night. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night. Good evening. New York's Governor Hugh Carey said today he was hopeful that President Ford would act before Thanksgiving to approve federal help for New York City. Jim?
And Theodore White later observed, Robin, quote, "One of the most serious campaigns run in the United States in the last 5 years was Norman Mailer's. I didn't vote for him, but the campaign was considered and thoughtful, the beginning of an attempt to apply ideas to a political situation. The job of intellectuals is to come up with ideas, and all we've been producing is footnotes." The federal government should step in now and do what Kerry and everybody wants them to do. Do you think the federal government has a responsibility to do that?
Well, look, the federal government has been taken in taxes from this city every year and giving back something like $7 billion to New York State, of which we then get a small percentage. In other words, the people of this city have been giving the federal government something like $3 or $4 or $5 for every dollar that comes back to the city. This has been going on. Of course, the federal government has a responsibility. The federal government's responsibility is to keep each city in the country more or less floatable.
Take the goal is so enormous here. I mean, it just, you grit your teeth and grind them when you think, with the large mixed population here, we could become probably the first place in the history of the earth where black and white somehow can exist and work, live together, and begin to get to the start and the beginning of the end of this horrible conflict we have around the country. With style. New York could set the style for the rest of the country how to do it. Here is how you can live together if you have whites and blacks. You do not have to listen to George Wallace. You don't have to listen to Richard Nixon. You don't have to listen to people pandering to your fears. You can do better than this. You can stand up and you can begin to live. All they need is a few jobs, the blacks. Just give them jobs.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Jim. Thank you, gentlemen. Jim Lehrer and I will be back tomorrow evening. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night.
Good evening. I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington.
And I'm Robert MacNeil in New York. After tonight's news summary, we debate the proposal to call nicotine a drug and put cigarettes under government regulation. Kwame Holman reports on the grassroots campaign for health care reform. Mark Shields and Paul Gigot analyze the week's politics. And essayist Roger Rosenblatt discusses the technique of Schindler's List.
Interior. Many sang hymns. And some kissed the large stone slab on which Christ's body is said to have been wrapped before burial. In Vatican City, Pope John Paul continued his Good Friday tradition of hearing the confessions of ordinary Roman Catholics in St. Peter's Basilica. Vatican officials selected people from India, Italy, Paraguay, Spain, and the Pope's native Poland to confess to their faith's spiritual leader. The Pope then prayed in St. Peter's before going to Rome's Colosseum for the Way of the Cross procession.
That's it for the news summary. Just ahead, some ifs and buts, hair, and a testament about terror. The debate over regulating cigarettes is our lead segment tonight. It's a debate that has caused smoke and fire lately. The fire came from the head of the Food and Drug Administration, who recently made new charges against tobacco companies. We begin with this backgrounder from correspondent Betty Ann Bowser.
City streets are one of the few places where America's 45 million smokers can still go and light up without repercussions. But last week, Food and Drug Commissioner David Kessler moved the debate on smoking away from where it's permitted to what's in cigarettes, namely nicotine.
The assumption has been that the nicotine in cigarettes is present solely because it is a natural and unavoidable component of tobacco. Mr. Chairman, that assumption needs to be re-examined. The amount of nicotine in a cigarette may be there by design.
In testimony before a House subcommittee, Kessler also said there is a growing body of evidence that tobacco companies are manipulating levels of nicotine in cigarettes to keep smokers hooked.
The public may think of cigarettes as no more than blended tobacco rolled in paper, but they are more than that. Some of today's cigarettes may in fact qualify as high-technology nicotine delivery systems that deliver nicotine in quantities sufficient to create and to sustain addiction in the vast majority of individuals who smoke regularly.
In an exchange with California Congressman Henry Waxman, a tobacco company executive denied the industry spikes its cigarettes.
The level of nicotine in tobacco of our products is solely determined by the tobacco that we buy and the blending of the different tobaccos during manufacturing. We do not set levels of nicotine for particular brands of cigarettes.
Do you know whether the nicotine levels can be manipulated from what would otherwise be in the blend or the product itself?
By blending tobacco is the only method of manipulation that is being used.
The industry is getting more vocal in its opposition to any further restrictions on cigarettes. Just last month, several thousand tobacco farmers came to Capitol Hill to protest a proposal to increase cigarette taxes.
Save our jobs! Save our jobs! Save our jobs!
And the industry's chief trade association thinks it's unfair to compare nicotine to heroin or cocaine.
It's irresponsible, completely irresponsible, to equate cigarettes with hard drugs. We do not unequivocally, unconditionally, without any equivocation at all, do not spike cigarettes or add nicotine to the level that occurs naturally in leaf tobacco.
Yesterday, Congressman Waxman released a report he says shows the tobacco industry knew as early as 1983 that nicotine was addictive, but withheld that report from publication. And like a growing number of legislators, Waxman wants to know if the industry should be subject to government regulation.
We must find out whether tobacco companies make deliberate decisions to assure a minimum level of nicotine in their products, and whether the purpose of such level is to maintain addiction, and what extraordinary efforts are made to keep this information secret. If true, this is corporate irresponsibility on a grand scale. If true, these practices may violate the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act and subject cigarettes to federal regulation.
So should the government go after cigarette manufacturers and regulate tobacco products like drugs?
Now, how health care reform is playing outside Washington. A Washington Post ABC News poll reported this week that support for the Clinton plan fell to 42% from 56% 6 months ago. The administration has been responding by sending top officials out into the country to join members of Congress home for the Easter break. Kwame Holman has this report about such an effort in Winfield, Kansas. Good night, Robin.
Good night, Jim. That's the news hour for tonight. Have a nice Easter weekend. We'll see you on Monday night. I'm Robert MacNeil. Good night.
Before we get to the 4 more MacNeil stuff, news hour stuff, and everything else besides that, which is this, and the book, breaking news by Robert MacNeil and Bless My Own by Jim Lehrer. I want to show you a trailer of what I'll be doing very soon. Tomorrow this August, tomorrow next month. Tomorrow then. Okay, folks? Okay.
Good evening, Vermont. In a few moments, we're going to bring you the entire proceedings in the first day of the Senate quarterly hearing.
Good evening. I'm Elizabeth Farnsworth in New York.
And I'm Jim Lehrer in Washington. After our summary of the news this Wednesday, we have full coverage of and reaction to the last-minute trade deal between the United States and Japan. Rod Minott reports on using marijuana as medicine, and essayist Ann Taylor Fleming considers cyberspace.
Current and former justices were present to honor the man who led the High Court from 1969 to 1986. The former Chief Justice will be buried tomorrow at Arlington National Cemetery. That's the news summary for tonight. Now we focus on today's trade deal with Japan, marijuana as medicine, and an essay on cyberspace.
The trade agreement between the United States and Japan is our lead story tonight. The dispute was over the Japanese auto market. The United States had threatened to impose 100% tariffs against Japanese luxury cars sold in the United States. Midnight tonight was the deadline. As it approached, negotiators in Geneva made a deal. President Clinton made the announcement in Washington.
One of the largest obstacles to free and fair trade has been the artificial barriers erected by Japan, especially around its auto and auto parts markets. For over 20 years, presidents have tried to fix this problem without success. This unfair situation had to end. Trade must be a two-way street. After 20 years, we finally have an agreement that will move cars and parts both ways between the United States and Japan. This breakthrough is a major step toward free trade throughout the world.
Finally tonight, essayist Ann Taylor Fleming is having second thoughts about the computer revolution.
For a while, I thought that I was the only one made adamantly nervous by the computer revolution. The only one still dragging my feet on the information highway, to mix a metaphor. After all, everybody I know seems to be computer hip, plugged in, online, part of some vast new virtual community where people do all of their business, both personal and professional, over a computer screen.
Again, the major stories of this Wednesday: American and Japanese negotiators reached a last-minute deal on autos. The agreement averted a trade war between the two countries that was to begin with 100% U.S. tariffs on Japanese luxury cars. And former Justice Department official and Clinton family associate Webb Hubbell was sentenced to 21 months in prison. He had pleaded guilty to charges he overbilled clients, among other things, while a private lawyer in Arkansas. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, Jim. That's the news hour for tonight. I'm Elizabeth Farnsworth. Good evening.
Wait, what? I'm just kind of confused here. Anyway, next news hour episode.
Good evening. Leading the news this Tuesday, the president of Czechoslovakia said there will eventually be no need for U.S. troops in Europe. Federal Reserve Chairman Greenspan said the economy may be past the danger of recession, and mine workers agreed to end their strike against Pittston Coal. We'll have the details in our news summary in a moment. Robin?
After the news summary, we have a newsmaker interview with Czech President Václav Havel. Then, should tobacco companies be able to target young women for cigarette ads? We have a debate between John O'Toole, president of the Association of American Advertising Agencies, and Anne-Marie O'Keefe of Women versus Smoking. And we close with an essay by Penny Stallings on the message in rock lyrics.
First tonight, a playwright named Havel, Václav Havel, the president of Czechoslovakia. He met with President Bush today at the White House, and he came by our studio right afterward for a newsmaker interview. A year ago, he was still a playwright whose work was banned in his own country because he criticized communist rule in Prague. He was arrested for speaking to this group of government opponents and was sentenced to 9 months in prison. But by the end of last year, he and other dissidents celebrated the fall of communist government, and a short time later, he was chosen president of Czechoslovakia. Here is our interview with him, conducted this afternoon. Mr. President, welcome. What was accomplished at your luncheon meeting with President Bush today?
We discussed many different topics, and it lasted 3/4 of an hour, more than was planned, and I was happy that our welcome was so warm and friendly, that we had an understanding. It was a very meaningful discussion for us, and let's hope that it was meaningful for the other side as well. We hope that the American officials, headed by President Bush, learned more about our country, about our views, about the conditions in Czechoslovakia. I was very satisfied with the meeting.
Did you come to the meeting with an agenda, various points or requests that you wanted to make?
Of course, we had an agenda both in general and specific terms, but I wouldn't dare to call them requests or even demands. These were just topics to deliberate on, to discuss the possibilities of a real cooperation and of really friendly ties between our two countries, because the previous government did not have such friendly relations.
Once again, Tuesday's main stories. President Bush offered economic aid and trade support to visiting Czechoslovak President Václav Havel. On the NewsHour, Havel said there eventually may be no need for U.S. troops in Europe. Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan said the U.S. economy may have escaped the near-term danger of a recession. And a new government report said smoking costs America more than $52 billion a year, mostly in extra health care and insurance expenses. Good night, Jim.
Good night, Robin. We'll see you tomorrow night. I'm Jim Lehrer. Thank you and good night.
Okay. I'm going to do one more of NewsHour episodes. And that's about it. Which is NewsHour with Jim Lehrer. Either that or Robert MacNeil report from July 21st of 1976. Parts of it, enjoy. All the rest will not be able to be in the tribute due to the appliances of Amersoft. Not gonna let me. So I decided to use DV Direct. So, without further ado, enjoy.
Good evening from Mars, or a reasonable facsimile, at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, the command center for the Viking operation. This is a working model of the Viking lander now sitting some 220 million miles away on the Martian surface. This model will be used to rehearse programs the actual lander will carry out in its weeks of complicated experiments ahead. That is still in the future. Tonight, the NASA scientists who designed this billion-dollar project and put it so spectacularly on target yesterday morning have plenty to chew over already. The very preliminary information which Viking has radioed back, and the spectacular pictures it's taken have already added significantly to knowledge of the planet. And tonight we find out how much. Dr. Carl Sagan is one of the team evaluating the visual information that's being sent back. The Cornell University astronomer is the scientist perhaps most personally identified with using the Viking mission in part to search for signs of life on Mars. Dr. Sagan, first of all, what do we know tonight about Mars that we did not know a day and a half ago?
An enormous amount, in fact, more than we can say, in the sense that the data is, of course, not fully analyzed at all. We know the close-up appearance of one place on Mars with an enormous, exquisite detail. We know information on the properties and particularly the chemistry of the Martian atmosphere that were not known before or in great dispute before. We have, as a result of orbital photography over the last few weeks of site certification for the lander, an array of photographs of the planet which exceeds in scientific interest and quantity as well as quality the sum of our previous information about the planet.
Just to ask, thank you, Dr. Hibbs, who was so patiently in your room in the other building here at JPL. I'm Robert MacNeil, and I'll be back tomorrow night. Good night.
Not only there is NewsHour episodes, but there are also merchandise of a NewsHour. There are PBS's NewsHour caps on. I'll be wearing that. I've been wearing this since graduation. Thanks to Annette Miller and David Butler and Alex Rosenberger. Sorry about the background noise there. Anyway. And you can find them on these two books. I never have the rest of the Robert MacNeil books and Jim Lehrer books. Here they are now. Breaking News by Robert MacNeil, the first edition. And A Bus of My Own by Jim Lehrer. And not only that, I'm giving out sneak peeks of what's coming soon to LJSPM Corporation. LJSPM TV, that is. Upcoming, like for example, big Morgan shows, more than my shows, mom shows, things like that. And we're LJPSPM TV special event. We're making a special event for August. So I need the NewsHour's help to do it. Do every single episode of the NewsHour. So, will you help me get ready for August? If so, excuse me, my mouth is mumbling again. Anyway, I can't remember what I said. Dang it. Oh well. I was saying that I was doing MacNeil Lehrer stuff, episodes from the archival stuff, episodes from the behind the scenes, from the archive episodes, Impact, and many more. So we have a 4.5-month fund for that. We might do it on Blu-ray, we might do it on DVD, things like that. So yeah. Before we go to this special event, I want I'm at NewsHour episodes and the merchandise and everything. I want to give you a sneak peek of what's coming this August. Okay, folks? Okay.
Finally tonight, some words from and about our man MacNeil, who leaves the NewsHour after tonight. The first words will be spoken by me over videotape.
Robert Breckinridge Ware MacNeil. That's what they named him then. Robin MacNeil is what we call him now. His parents in Canada gave him much more than a name. They gave him an appreciation for words and ideas, and that helped him grow up to be our Robin MacNeil, the man who gave us the story of English.
Our story is not about the correct way to speak English, but about all the different varieties and how they came to be.
He's the man of television who realized that television was more than an electric box that made sounds and transmitted moving pictures, that it was also an instrument for transmitting the words and ideas of serious people, of people with things to say that deserve to be heard. The man of television who for 40 years has practiced what he realized, who has always walked ahead of his class in journalism, as a reporter for Reuters, a correspondent and anchorman for NBC.
Robert MacNeil, NBC News, Liverpool, England.
For the BBC, and for the last 20 years for PBS, public television.
In a few moments, we're going to bring you the entire proceedings in the first day of the Senate Watergate hearings.
It was his idea in 1975 to do a nightly program that looked seriously at one story a night for 30 minutes.
Good evening.
Those in charge at WNET New York supported him in his idea, and eventually so did the entire public broadcasting family. In 1983, he joined with others in offering another idea. The half-hour program had been a supplement to nightly newscasts on the commercial networks.
And I think what's nice about the editor...
He said, how about doing a program that was an alternative to them, something to be watched instead of them rather than in addition to them. Not everybody in public television thought that was a terrific idea, but enough did to give him and his colleagues a fair and good, clean shot.
When we return on Monday night, it will be in our new format.
The end result is the MacNeil-Lehrer NewsHour.
After the news summary, our entire focus tonight is the Soviet nuclear disaster. We lead tonight with a look at teenagers and the AIDS epidemic. Still to come on the NewsHour, what's ahead in Bosnia and rethinking affirmative action.
It's a program that's many things to many people. Serious, too serious to some. OJ-less, too OJ-less to some. Even-handed, too even-handed to some.
We get 4 outside views now. We get 3 assessments now. Now 4 views of welfare reform, 2 from the states, 2 from Congress.
But whatever, most of the critics and the fans of the program agree on one thing. It's a civilized place, and that is no accident. It's civilized because its creator is a civilized man who believes civilized discourse is the way to real revelation and understanding.
How are your orders communicated to the millions of your followers? Would you, Fidel Castro, who values the independence and integrity of a small country, what is it about the kind of flower in the Amazon forests that attracts you, the artist? You say you have feelings. You're doing this interview to show you have feelings. How do you feel? Can you explain in simple terms to perhaps bewildered Americans why there is so much equivocation? Are you saying that in order to get a maximum audience, some talk show hosts are actively and consciously promoting, you said, paranoia and anger and hatred? How, without growing cynical, can citizens protect themselves against stubborn ignorance or misplaced zeal of their leaders?
He's not perfect, though. He has problems, huge problems, for instance, with names, particularly those of guests on the program.
Senator Owens, what's your... Senator Hopper, I'm sorry. What is your... Mr... I beg your pardon, I called you Reef. Are you in favor of... Ed Grubbs in L.A., do you hear me?
It's Ken Grubbs.
Ken Grubbs, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry, Ken. I beg your pardon.
There will be no more of that after October 20th. But that's about it as far as what we will have no more of.
Frank, no brakes. Okay, ready wash, ready beat. Stand by. Dissolve.
Television is often called the most transient and fluid of mediums, here for a minute or even an hour and then gone and forgotten. But Robert MacNeil will never be gone or forgotten. He will be there when his immediate colleagues of today carry on the news hour, and when anyone practices serious journalism of any kind on any television. He's leaving permanent tracks along the way he traveled and worked and created. They are tracks of courage to do what he knew to be right, then to actually do it right, and to do it with grace and class and with good humor. Yes, Canadians really do have a sense of humor.
Thank you, sir. That is very generous.
Well, you're welcome. We're going to miss everything about you except the whistling, MacNeil.
Yeah. The only thing that leaves out, Mr. Lehrer, in your modesty, is that you've always been more than 50% of the creative energy behind the NewsHour and the program that went before it.
Well.
But I have to say one other thing, and you know this. It is not creeping senility which causes me to forget names on the air. I've been forgetting names for more than 40 years. The very first television interview I ever did, which was live in Canada, I forgot the names of both the people I was interviewing and had to say so to them.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us something about what we've all been calling the New World Order that starts on Monday?
Well, it's the fact of the matter is going to take hundreds of people to replace you, sir. No, the big emphasis is going to be on the repertory company. It isn't going to be on me. It's going to be on all the folks, and the people who watch this program regularly know who they are, the correspondents who are going to be functioning in kind of sub-anchor roles, the kinds of things that you and I now do most of is now going to be done by a group of folks, everybody, the correspondents who are now familiar to us, and they're going to be familiar to the audience. They're going to be all over the country as well as here in Washington and elsewhere. And then, of course, are the existing team, Shields and Gigot, of course, the new Gergen Dialogue, our regional commentators, the essayists, the historians, and other specialist reporters. And my plan is to, as I say, have a multitude of voices and perspectives on this program. As I say, it's going to take hundreds to replace you.
Yeah, I think the neat thing about that is you lose one almost 65-year-old white male and you gain a lot more attractive, younger, varied people from all over the country and all that. So that's...
Well, we'll see about that.
Look, I honestly feel, I've been telling people everywhere when they ask about it, I think every institution benefits from change, even forced change, and I really believe that with a program consolidating in Washington under your very inspired leadership, it's going to be re-energized, it's going to be revitalized, and it will benefit from the change, and I think the viewers will see that.
Well, I hope they do. The only positive thing is that in order to replace, we can't replace you, but compensate for your not being here, is that it's going to tax all of our imaginations and all of our energies to do that, and I'm sure on Monday, that will be exciting, and I will concentrate on that. We're ready. We're all ready for it, and I feel good about it. As I say, I'll probably feel better about it once I'm doing it. Right now, that's a little hard to think about.
There's another idea I'd like to kick around a little bit. I've been saying this kind of stuff outside the program when people come and ask how I feel about leaving and all that, and if you'll forgive a little partisanship, I know you will.
I will.
I think there is a growing need for this kind of program. We were very confident, remember, in the half-hour form that it was something different and needed then, and we were scared but confident when we went to the hour. But I think the environment in which this program operates, looking at the whole spectrum of television today, there is more and more need for it. There is a relentless drive in our medium to make everything more entertaining.
Yeah. Well, it's been borne out in the in our audience. I mean, our audience continues to grow, and the people who are watching us for the first time in 20 years actually sit and talk to each other. They must be stunned. But anyhow, they have seen how this thing has progressed, and I agree. In many ways, you could make the case, and I would make the case, and I know you would make the case that we're needed more now than ever before, as there's so many outlets now for news and for everything else. One place that you can go every hour, every day for an hour and find out what's been going on and what's important. I mean, that's our function, that's our mission, and that's not going to change with your leaving.
You know, I'm constantly asked, and I know you are in interviews, and there have been a lot of them just now, I'm constantly asked, well, but isn't your program a little boring to some people? And I find that amazing because, well, sure, it probably is, but there are people who don't watch. The people who watch it all the time don't find it boring, or they wouldn't watch. And it's this strange idea that's come out of this medium because it's become so much a captive of its tool, as its use as a sales tool, that it's driven increasingly, I think, by a tyranny of the popular. I mean, after all, you and I have said this to each other lots of times, might as well share it with the audience. What is the role of an editor? The role of an editor is to make judgments somewhere between what he thinks is important, or what they think is important, and what they think is interesting and entertaining.
Sure, and we have found, Robin, that if you pay taxes, if there's a story about the possibility of their going up or down, that ain't boring. If you're on Medicare and there's an opportunity, there's a possibility that you may get more or less of it, that ain't boring. If you are a young person or related to a young person who might or might not have to go to a foreign shore with a weapon in his or her hand, War and Peace ain't boring. And we know that, and the folks who watch this program know that. Look, tell us about. I know, but tell the audience what you're up to now. What are you going to do after tonight?
Well, I'm going to have the great luxury, I think it is, for the first time in virtually 40 years that I've been mostly in daily journalism, being able to wake up in the morning and not have to fill my head up with the sort of stuff you're just describing. And, and I can do it in the same way the average citizen does, when he chooses. And so when Mr. Gingrich does something, or something happens in Bosnia, or the president does something, I can read about it in the afternoon or the next day if I want to. And I can spend my time writing books, which I really want to do. I'm not like you, as you know very well. I can't write a chapter of a book in 1 hour and then work on the program in another.
I don't write them in 1 hour. It's an hour. It usually takes 90 minutes or 2 hours.
Right. I just have to tear myself away from one thing and then do something else. And so that's going to be a great luxury. And then, as well, we have this partnership, MacNeil, Lehrer Productions and Liberty Media, who are now 2/3 owner of MacNeil, Lehrer Productions. And while you oversee the NewsHour side of that, I'm going to oversee whatever programs or series we're able to do outside the NewsHour.
Like the story, comparable to the story of England.
I hope so. Yeah. I hope so, if we can land that. And so that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
But there's one thing I didn't quite finish on the other point. You must be amazed, as I am amazed all the time, the number of people who were amazed about why did you do O.J. Simpson so little? Why? What's your answer when you're asked that question?
Well, it's a matter of news judgment. We believed, you and I and our whole team believed that when O.J. Simpson, when the murders occurred, that was news. The White Bronco thing, that was news. When O.J. was arrested, that was news. When he was indicted, that was news. When the trial started, that was news. The Mark Furman tapes were news. The verdict was news. Everything else in between that those 8.5 months has been fascinating, it's been interesting, but it's been real, but it's been a soap opera and it has not been news. That's our judgment. That doesn't mean that everybody else who disagreed with us is wrong, but that was our basic judgment, particularly when you compare it to all these other things that I was just talking about in terms of what's important. That just didn't fall into our judgment as something that was as important on any given day.
Yeah, amen, amen.
Hey, Robin.
I guess that's it.
Yeah, hey, good night, Robin.
Good night, Jim. Finally, I'd just like to say to the audience how grateful I am to public television nationally and to all the 300 local stations who carry us for the opportunity you've given me to work in a manner I could be proud of when I went home every night. But that applies equally to our viewers. Without you, no program. There are now some 5 million of you a night, and you express a loyalty to this program of a quality I've never experienced anywhere else. Thank you for understanding what we do. You'll find all the same values there on Monday night and in the years ahead. Thanks, and good night.
Not only there is NewsHour merchandise, episodes,